5:00, in which case we can get the meeting underway. I'd like to welcome everybody to today's meeting of the panel, both those that are participating and those who are watching from home. If you have any technical difficulties during the meeting, then please contact the Democratic Services Officer on call, who will attempt to assist you. Today's officer on call is Charlotte Crowley, and the number to call is 577 193. I would ask participants, when you are not speaking, please mute your microphone. This minimises background noise and will help everyone in listening to the proceedings. Microphones must only be on if the participant has been granted permission to speak. To gain my permission to speak, please very briefly indicate on the chat to the right side of the screen, and I will then make a note and go back to you once the person speaking has finished. And if I forget, I'm sure Charles will remind me. Would everyone present please ensure that their mobile phones are turned to silent and that they are not used to make or receive phone calls whilst the meeting is in progress. Please also refrain from checking emails or conducting other business, and ensure that you are in a quiet room, free from distractions for the duration of the meeting. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed for members of the public. The meeting will also be recorded and will subsequently be broadcast on the internet. Please can I ask the members of the panel to confirm that they are present in the meeting when I read out your name. I will ask for the attendance of those councillors who are participating in order to speak under 20.1 separately. So members, if you could acknowledge that you're here. Councillor Campbell?
Yes, I'm here, Bob.
Councillor Boyd?
Yes, here.
Councillor Coleman-Cook?
Yes, here.
Councillor Hopkinson? Councillor Hopkinson, no. Councillor Huxley?
Yes.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Hopkinson, you're now here, yes?
Yes, yeah. Sorry,
Okay. Okay, Councillor Huxley?
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Keane?
Yes, here.
Councillor Patmore? Councillor Patmore? No. Councillor Paulmore? Councillor Paulmore, no. Councillor Linda Piper? Councillor Linda Piper? No. Councillor Rattigan?
Yeah, I'm here, Councillor Piper.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Linda. Okay, Councillor Rattigan?
So what do I do now?
No. Councillor Wing?
Yes, I'm here for Trevor.
Okay. Councillor Rozecki, I've seen, but can you confirm you're here still?
I'm here still, Bob, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. And Councillor Scott?
Present, Chair.
Thank you. Right, the following members have asked to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1. When I say your name, please can you confirm that you are present at the meeting? Councillor Ashby?
I'm here.
Councillor Garner?
I'm here, Bob.
And Councillor Dexter?
I'm here, Bob.
Okay, are there any more members who would like to speak under 20.1? No, thank you. Today, we do not have any requests for public speaking. Moving on, apologies for absence. Councillor Roper, who's substituted by Councillor Wing. Are there any more apologies?
Sorry, Chairman. Just to say that Councillor Patmore is being assisted to get into the meeting by Charlotte at the moment. So she's fully intends to join us. She hasn't given her apologies. Okay,
thank you, Nick. Thank you. Okay, are there any declarations of interest? Okay, agenda item 3, minutes of previous meeting. To approve the meeting of the overview, to approve February 2020, copy of was attached to the agenda pack. Can I have a proposer, please?
Councillor Campbell proposes.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder?
I'll second that. So.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Coleman-Cook. Unless I hear any objection, I will take these as approved. Okay, members, those are approved. Thank you very much. We move on to pre-decision scrutiny, agenda item 4. I'd just like to make a few comments to put this agenda item into context before we begin. The The report by the independent inspectors concludes that the draft local plan is sound, but only if all of the inspectors' modifications are accepted, Annex 2 of the panel report. This is because the modifications are considered by the inspectors to be necessary to make the plan sound, legally compliant and capable of adoption. The decision for the council is therefore to either adopt the draft plan with the modifications in the inspector's report or to not adopt the plan. It is not open to the council either to partially accept the modifications or to make further changes to the plan that go beyond the inspector's report and have not been recommended by the inspectors. This would leave the council with a local plan that was not sound. The panel report and the briefing notes set out the significant risks to the council of not having a local plan in place. I would therefore ask members to bear this in mind when raising points about the inspector's report or the panel report. The role of the panel tonight is therefore to consider the inspector's report and the main modifications and to agree any recommendations for Cabinet to consider prior to it making its final recommendations to Council. The recommendation should therefore be changed to reflect the role of the ONS panel this evening. The revised recommendation is as follows. The Obion Scrutiny panel is recommended to consider the main modification from the inspector's report and agree what representations, if any, to make to Cabinet, for Cabinet to consider prior to it making its final recommendations to Council. Is that clear, members? Okay. Moving on, I will now introduce Adrian Farrell to introduce the report. Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. I'm going to keep my introduction brief, as you already have the report and a briefing note. I'm very pleased that we've finally received our inspector's report on the local plan. It seems to have taken a long time. I'm also very pleased that they found the plan sound subject to the modifications, and that's all set out in Annex 2 of the report. The key modifications are set out in paragraph 2.8 of the panel report. As you will see from the report, much of the local plan strategy is supported by the inspectors: overall housing numbers and sites, employment land and sites, policy relating to retail and tourism, and a range of environmental policies as well. It's important to have an adopted local plan in place. With the adoption of the plan, the council will have a strong planning policy framework which gives the council greater control over the development process. It provides certainty for local people about the scale of and location of development, and it also supports the work of the planning applications team, particularly in terms of dealing with appeals. It also means that the planning applications team can rely on the plan in dealing with the larger housing sites and in seeking to ensure that infrastructure, open space and other facilities are provided in a timely manner. It will also support the council in making bids for government funding for infrastructure improvements. Without a sound plan, there is a risk of further intervention or direction by the Secretary of State. It would place the council at risk in terms of appeal decisions and potentially could jeopardise the delivery of key infrastructure or government funding. Essentially, it risks the council losing control of the development process. There's detailed advice on this stage of the local plan is in the panel report under section 2, and I would support the chairman's earlier comments about how to consider the inspector's main modifications. I'm happy to answer any questions members may have. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Adrian. What I intend to do is to take the members who are speaking under 20.1, get them to make their representation to the panel, and then Adrian come back to you for comment on that. Then we'll move on to the panel members and the discussion there. So, Councillor Ashby.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would just like to ask a question, which I submitted earlier. So hopefully it's Adrian received that okay. Under the draft local plan policy SP23 4.36 states, there are various green infrastructure projects being progressed by the council and other organisations, and also a number of community projects. Dane Valley Woods is listed under this section within the DLP. This site was also included in the Thanet Local Plan 2006 under SR 14 Community Woodlands, which stated support will be given to the establishment of a new publicly accessible woodland of an appropriate scale in suitable locations in the district, notably at the urban fringe for recreation, landscape and nature conservation purposes. The following sites are currently proposed for community woodlands. 1, Hartsdown 20s, Margate, and Dane Valley Road, Margate. My question is it true to say that there is no provision in the new plan for any new woodland area, despite the specific reference to the 25-year Environmental Plan 2018 in the modifications? Also, is there a mechanism to carry over any unfulfilled statements made in the 2006 local plan for the Dane Valley site? And if so, how would it be actioned? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ashby. Councillor Garner.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd just like to raise a point, really, which is partly a question. I know that the inspector has identified a number of areas to be considered in the 6-month review, which was kicked off last week. And when I'm part of the local plan review group, one of the main areas that the inspector identified was climate change. So it does sort of link in with what Councillor Ashby just said. I just wanted to make sure that as part of the 6-month review, the climate change working group, which will be working in parallel to the local plan group, can sync up together. So, because I'm sure there will be a number of changes identified and recommended by the climate change working group that will need to be made to the local plan. And I want to make sure that those changes, the climate change working group doesn't drag too long, so as we miss the boat to enable the changes to be made to the local plan as part of the local plan review. Just want to make sure that that's synced up and it's sort of recorded and made sure it all links up together. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. Councillor Dexter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have nothing to say at this point, but I may come out. I've just come here to observe, but I may like to say something later. Thank you very much.
Councillor Dexter, you can't make a comment later. If you come in under 20.1, you need to speak now, and then unfortunately you have to observe the rest of the meeting.
Okay.
I'm sure Councillor Savage can confirm that rules is rules.
No, that's all right. I understand.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Farrell, would you like to comment on the 2 points made so far, please? Mr. Farrell, are you there?
Obviously not.
Thank you, Chairman. My mute button just kept disappearing again.
Oh, not that line again. You used that this morning.
Yes, I know. Apologies. Yes. So on the questions raised by Councillor Ashby, yes, it's right to say that there aren't any specific sites identified for new woodland planting in the draft local plan. There were 2 sites, as she rightly says, in the 2006 plan. They were based on a couple of projects that the council was working on at that time. There aren't any new ones currently being proposed at the moment, and that's why there's nothing in the current local plan. But obviously, if projects do develop over the next few months, this is something that we could pick up in the local plan review. There is quite a lot. I won't go through it in detail. There's quite a lot in the local plan about new open space, particularly on the strategic sites, some of which is likely to be landscaping and woodland. And there are a number of other policies supporting the provision of green infrastructure on new sites. And in relation to the second question, there's not really a mechanism for us to carry that forward, the reference to the Dane Valley Wood in this plan. But the site is protected as local green space as part of the local plan. And as the site is currently used as open space and woodland, that's sufficient to protect the site for that purpose for future years. So that's the situation we're in, but we can't make a late change to the plan in respect to the Dane Valley Woods. And then the other question was from Councillor Garner relating to climate change. Yeah, there are council officers involved in an officer working group, and we are trying to pick up the issues that come out of the climate change working group. The end of the 6 months doesn't necessarily mean that we can't look at other changes during the update period. The review period just enables us to identify some of the key issues that are emerging. So I hope the two things will work in parallel together. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Ashby, you've indicated you'd like to come back. I mean, that's not usual, but is it a quick point you want to make?
Yes, please, Chair. It's just for Adrian. The reason I asked about the unfulfilled Dane Valley site was the fact that that could be deemed to be reincarnated, if you like, for a new site. Obviously, it can, if it could come in under the consultation period and be shown as an amendment. That's the reason I brought it in, was the fact that nothing has really happened to it, and it hasn't fulfilled what it was originally intended in 2006. So what I'm basically saying is, could that come back in as a reinstatement and be providing a woodland site for technically a new woodland site, because it wasn't fulfilled the last time round.
Mr. Farrell.
It's too late to make that change at this stage of the plan, really. It is something we can pick up in the review, and there's no reason why that shouldn't be looked at. As I say, it is protected as local green space, so the site as a site is protected for the long term in any event. So it's something we could look at as part of the review.
Thank you. Thank you. Members, moving on now to panel members. Have Councillor Campbell who would like to make some points.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. First of all, I'd just like to congratulate Adrian on an enormous amount of work. This is, as you and I know, Bob, this local plan has been in various incarnations, been going on for about 11 years. I mean, I was a mere boy when it first started, I think, and I'm certainly not that now. Although my group has not particularly support all the recommendations within the local plan, we're prepared to propose acceptance to Cabinet, acceptance of the draft local plan with the amendments by the inspector to go through to ensure that this council has a sustained local plan. Otherwise, this council is extremely vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Councillor Rozecki.
Thank you, Chair. No, just a quick comment. As Councillor Campbell's just said, yeah, congratulations on getting this far. I'd like to thank the other independents for helping out to get this far, and we shall be supporting promoting this local plan, and let's move it forward and get this council safe.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Rozecki. Are there any other comments from members? Councillor Hopkinson. Councillor Hopkinson?
Just trying to unmute myself, sorry.
Okay, you've succeeded.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I'm not sure, I'm just trying to understand the exact implications of, the fact we have to accept the modifications as they are. I mean, am I right in understanding, are we able to pick up on specific bits of wording and particular issues during this meeting and ask Cabinet to consider those, or do we have to just, because I have a series of things I would like to suggest that the Cabinet consider, but I'm not clear if we're actually, are we able to do that during this meeting? Are we able to suggest amendments to particular things?
Well, as far as I understand it. What we can do tonight is to make comments, and that would include your thoughts on perhaps how things could be improved. But if you make those points, then we can ask Mr. Verrill if any of those are sort of ruled out of court, because obviously some things would be unacceptable. But if you'd like to go ahead and make your points, then we can take it on from there, Councillor Hopkinson.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. I mean, a couple of them are quite minor. Things like in section 2.30, which lists the sort of, all the major overall points for strategy towards Ramsgate. It's listing the marina and things like that. It doesn't actually list Ramsgate Port. And although that's a minor thing, it seems to me, symbolically, it's important to state in that pretty important paragraph that the port is considered part of the council's approach, particularly given the public consultation and the consideration we're all putting into what could happen to the port. That's one point I had about the port at 2.30. And related to that, at one point in the report, it does say that the council ideally wants to have a roll-on, roll-off service at Ramsgate Port, but I would have thought that's not really accurate at the moment. And so I wonder if that's something that we could ask Cabinet to consider changing, given that, my understanding is that we're currently open-minded as to what the port could be. So it's misleading to say that well, as far as I understand, it's misleading to say that we want it to be a roll-on, roll-off service there.
Okay, are they your comments, Councillor Hopkinson?
I have got some others, but I just, perhaps there can be some.
Well, if you'd like to make all your points, and then we can get them dealt with as a list.
Okay. So I was contacted only within this afternoon, I think, and I imagine all other members were contacted as well by Westwood Town Council by email, and they make the point that the population projections, which lots of this document is based on, were put together in 2014, and they claim that they are inaccurate and that we could do better in terms of projections. Now, I don't have any idea really whether they are correct about that, because we've only just received it this afternoon. I can't comment on that, but I wonder if we could put it to Cabinet to consider the Westgate Town Council's proposal that we look at updating those projections to something more reliable, which is what they propose. So that's another point I wanted to make.
Okay, before you carry on, as I understand it, and Mr. Verrill can confirm or deny this in a minute, the housing numbers at this particular point, I don't think are subject to any kind of change. They were worked out to a formula, and the inspectors have endorsed that number, although they changed the timing, if you like, of the housing delivery. So I don't think that will be on, but Mr. Verrill will sort of come back to that in a minute. I think, want to reiterate the point that we here are not really in the position of changing the local plan. That's not really an option, but there will obviously be a time when we come to the 6-month review for people to put that point of view across. So if you want to move on to your next point, Councillor Hopkinson.
Yeah, I wonder if the plan is taking full account of some other things the council has decided to take forward. For example, in the corporate statement, we've committed to something I've got a personal interest in, which is the community wealth building programme. And I wonder if, apart from anything else, if that shouldn't get a mention within the document. And there's, for example, I had a suggestion about where that could go in. I think it was 1.24 would be, a very easy place to just add in reference to that as part of the overall strategy towards growth and creation of job opportunities in Thanet. So it seems to me that would be an easy place to put that in. And it seems to me also that it's a bit of an omission if community wealth building isn't mentioned in the local plan, given that it's on the corporate statement and it's already an agreed objective of the council, as I understand it.
Okay.
And this is a wider point coming out of that is that this may well be something which can't be changed at this point. But if the community wealth building is mentioned and is part of the plans, then it could have a bearing on some of the things that are mentioned in the document, and it might have an effect on how some of those things are worded and framed. But going back to what I was asking at the beginning, I'm not sure if it's possible for us to consider that type of thing at this point.
Okay, thank you. Right, moving on, Councillor Wing. Councillor Wing?
Sorry, I'm trying to find my mute button. Yes, thank you. I'm standing in for Trevor, so I'm probably playing a bit of catch up. But one of the things, it's a long time coming, the local plan. So thank you to everybody who's put it together. But I'm assuming that the document is flexible and would move and change. And I think the local plan was delivered pre-COVID, and now we've got this post-COVID situation arising where the normal we knew probably isn't going to exist again. So I suppose my first comment is, what will we do with the local plan as the new normal emerges? Because we've got no idea what the new normal is going to look like until a cure is found. And the other question is, I suspect whether we support the airport or not, we continue to be frustrated by a decision over Manston. How will that delay in that decision again possibly affect the local plan? So they're just two points to be mindful of. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Councillor Scott.
Hello there. Yeah, right. I feel like I should just chime in with my 2 cents as well. I mean, first of all, I understand that the local plan is a very contentious topic, subject, and it is also a lot of work has gone into it, and it's obviously on the grander scheme of things. However, I do feel like I need to have my sort of say in my ward specifically. But overall, I mean, on sort of agricultural land, one of the key aspects is we're going to potentially lose a lot of grade 1 agricultural land, which is obviously not ideal in the slightest. It's not reversible. I mean, once it's built upon, we have now lost that fundamental land, which we can at this time grow and harvest crops on. I think the biggest concern for me is obviously we've now been sort of given a bit of a lifeline where apparently for us, for Westgate, that this is going to be, the building is going to be put back a bit further. But during that time, should things change, such as any sort of current climate and land scale, would we continue to actually look for brownfield sites? I mean, if we are able, I appreciate and understand that the housing numbers cannot be changed now, but if we are able to actually find legitimate and accommodating brownfield sites, can we potentially shift and protect what is essentially our greenfields? So, I mean, that's just a comment that I feel is certainly, and I'm speaking possibly for myself, but maybe a number of the villages probably feel that sentiment. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Mr. Verrell, I think there's 1 or 2 points for you to address there.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll try and pick those up.
If you forget any, we'll remind you, don't worry.
That's fine, thank you. I think, in all honesty, most of these points are points that we could pick up in the review. It's too late to deal with those through this process. Just to cover a couple of quick things that were mentioned. Certainly there was a discussion at the examination about the role of the port. There were people objecting to it being a port, and there was a discussion about whether we ought to change the policy. Our view at the time, at that point, there was no consultant study in relation to possible future options, was that the policy should remain as it is for the time being, and that we would pick this up in the review. So I understand the points that are being made about Port Ramsgate. I'm aware of the study. I have recently regular conversations with Mike Humber and others who are involved in that, and we would pick that up in the review. And similarly with the other points, community wealth building, certainly the resilience issue that was raised by Councillor Wing, particularly in terms of COVID, but you could apply that across a wide variety of topics about how we plan for resilience in the future. And I think that probably will change the way we apply certain things. I note the point about the airport. That is a matter for the review, and obviously we'll need to look at whatever decision comes out and make decisions accordingly. So clearly, if the airport DCO is granted, we'll need to look at things like traffic impacts, public safety zones, air quality, aircraft noise contours, all those sorts of things that are a sort of knock on from that. If it's not, then at some point, not exactly sure when, but we will need to look at what happens to the site if it's not going to be used for aviation. I note the point that was made about agricultural land, but we have to find sites for housing. That's not really an option that's available to us to not find sites. There are a lot of brownfield sites in the local plan. We released about 30 hectares of older industrial land for housing. But I think we still have, we still had to find the sites for those other housing units, and the inspectors have supported the sites that we've proposed and said that that's a sound approach. The strategic sites only take about 5% of the agricultural land in Thanet in this plan. But obviously, in the review, we will look again at whatever brownfield sites become available during that time and include those. I think the other point related to population projections, yes, the government, the population projections are produced every 2 years. So 14, 16 and 18, but they don't come through as housing projections until later. But the government, when the 2016 projections were published, advised local authorities that they should stick with the 2014 projections because they didn't consider the 2016 projections to be sufficiently accurate, which is why we're working to those at the moment. I hope I've answered all the questions, but come back if I haven't. Thank you.
Well, one thing I don't think you've addressed, Adrian, was Councillor Wing's point that, given COVID and so on, that, the world might never be the same again. And this plan was written, obviously, a snapshot in time before that. The question is, how is the local plan treated in that changed world? I mean, how do we go about modifying it, or, how do we respond to the reality that we find against that kind of mythical world that the local plan paints?
Well, I think largely it would have to be a matter for the review. We still have to find sufficient housing sites to meet our need. The design of those individual sites may change. So when applications are being prepared, it may be that the way they approach, say, public spaces or how people access housing, that the way that that's designed may change to some degree to respond to that resilience issue. There is some guidance that's been produced by the Local Government Information Unit, which we will be looking at as part of the review process. I think when it comes to applications on the allocated sites, that's going to have to be looked at on a site-by-site basis by the individual case officers and planning committee as they come through. I hope. Thank you. Question. So it's a bit uncertain with how we respond to this at the moment.
Okay. The other one that sticks in my mind is this question that the local plan refers to a ro-ro ferry at the port, but that isn't necessarily what we might be wanting. If you could explain that a bit.
Yeah, as I say, there was a discussion about this at the examination, and the port policy that exists at the moment is not dissimilar to what was in previous plans. We were aware that there's some consultants' work going on looking at potential future options for the port, but at the time that hadn't been published or no decisions had come out of that. So our position with the inspectors was that we felt the policy should remain as it is until those decisions are made, and obviously that's an ongoing process, and we will try and pick up the changes to the port strategy through the review of the plan so that it's more closely related to whatever decision comes out of that process.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Boyd.
Thank you, Chair. There's been a lot of talk about the review of the plan. I wonder if you could clarify with me, is the review of the plan have to be in 6 months, or is it within 6 months? If so, could we bring it forward, or are we at risk that if we leave it 6 months, that those designer housing people, whatever you want to call them, that are ready and willing to submit their application now because they've been on it for 20 months plus, how do we know that they could submit their plan application before we get to review, and therefore these elements that we want to change, we can't?
Okay, Mr. Farrell.
Sorry, mute button. Yeah, the requirement for us to review the plan, that's an internal process. So that's for the council to review what's in this plan once it's adopted, and to say what needs to change, how will we update the plan. And that 6 months has been effectively set by the Secretary of State and also by our inspectors. So yes, it is likely that planning applications for some of those sites will come forward in that process, in that timescale, and we will have to consider them against the plan.
Thank you. Members, do I have any other speakers on this item? Okay. We talked at the beginning about how we were going to handle this, and we said that we would take all comments and areas that have been raised by members and include them in a list to send to Cabinet. But I'm also minded that at the beginning, Councillor Campbell raised the point that, you know, the necessity for us to have this adopted plan subject to being reviewed in 6 months, and he was suggesting a recommendation to Cabinet that subject to noting the comments that have been made, Obion and Scrutiny are recommending that the plan and the inspectors' amendments be passed. Does that find a seconder anywhere?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you.
Councillor
Thank you. In terms of taking a vote, once again, as I did at the beginning, if I will take silence as acquiescence, so are members happy for that to go forward? So it's a recommendation to adopt the plan and the inspectors' suggested changes, having taken note of the comments that members have made tonight, which I will ask Charles to include in the recommendation going on to Cabinet. I don't hear it.
Chair.
Sorry? Who's?
Okay, yeah. I mean, is it possible if I were to abstain?
You can abstain, yeah. If that's what you want to do.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay. So with one abstention, that is passed, members. Thank you. Moving on, agenda item 5, post-decision scrutiny. There are no items under this section tonight. And moving on to section 6, review of the Obion Scrutiny Panel Work Programme 2019-2020. Members are asked to note the report. Does anyone have any comment they want to make on that? Okay.
Noted.
Sorry. Pardon? Councillor Campbell.
Noted.
Thank you. And would you care to note agenda item 7 as well, with the forward plan and exempt cabinet report, which I think has got 2 items on it?
Yes, I certainly will. Noted.
Thank you. Once again, members, if I don't hear any cries of anguish, take items 6 and 7 as having been agreed. Your silence is golden. Can I thank you, members, for your participation this evening? Thank you, officers, for the support, and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.